Hello, beautiful homemakers. We're continuing the story of Miss Innocent and Johnny, and the last sentence last time read, "Will her innocence nurse it into action?" And this next section is called Satisfying Judgment. Not immediately, for Innocent learns, just as the salesman and the orator learn, that action does not always follow desire. If Johnny's judgment tells him that marriage is unwise, he will struggle with his desire and endeavor by every means possible to overcome it. He may, for example, question very reasonably whether his salary, which has hitherto sufficed for himself alone, can be made to suffice for two. He may not be sure that his salary, such as it is, will continue. His position may be so new as to feel insecure. The boss may at times act cantankerous. Luck may be running against him in other ways. Until poor Johnny feels that the world and his position in it is a very shaky affair indeed. When a man in these circumstances contemplates marriage, there are quite a few things to think about besides the mere gratification of his wishes. Johnny's judgment, therefore, warns him to step carefully. Miss Innocent makes a shrewd guess. Now Innocent, vixen that she is, knows Johnny well enough by this time to make a shrewd guess as to the obstruction that is baffling him. But even though she knows exactly what it is, and though she feels sure that the mountain is in reality a molehill, she cannot do as the salesman and the orator do, frankly and openly undertake to remove the obstruction. As Johnny has not yet breathed a word of his desires to her, it would be unutterably bold and unmaidenly for her to profess any knowledge of them. Imagine a modest little girl like Innocent saying, "You don't have to tell me how you feel. I know already. These obstacles amount to nothing, and this hesitation on your part is all such nonsense. Let's get married and prove it." Much as she might like to say something like this, she dares not make the remotest reference to the subject, or give the slightest inkling of her consciousness of his desire to marry. What, in such a predicament, is she to do? For the first time in her life, perhaps, Innocent does some intense thinking, mixed, of course, with one or two crying spells. For days and days Johnny remains uppermost in her mind, and as a result a solution of her problem ultimately begins to take shape. Johnny's present salary is only temporary. Johnny is still young. If he can earn a living now, surely he will do a great deal better than that in just a year or two. Why, he's just beginning. Everybody has to begin at the bottom. But a man like Johnny certainly won't stay there very long. He must have more self-confidence, self-reliance. If he had that, he wouldn't hesitate to ask her to wait for him. He would know that he was going to forge ahead in the race for supremacy and rise to the top with the best of his competitors. If he had the same confidence in himself that she has, matrimony would not appear such a hazardous undertaking. But how is Innocent going to inspire him with her own viewpoint of these matters? How she plays on Johnny's moods. Fortunately, Johnny, like the rest of us, has his moods of optimism and of pessimism. Innocent now lies in wait for one of the optimistic moods. Meanwhile, she deliberates upon the philosophy of success. She observes and reads about successful young men, discovers that success is mostly a matter of determination, willpower, persistence, and self-reliance, and persuades herself that Johnny has all the qualifications needed. The first time, therefore, that Johnny shows an inclination to speak hopefully of his future outlook, Innocent is ready for him. Johnny's optimism, she shows, is nothing compared to her own. She dilates upon what she has learned of the ease of achieving success and upon what she has observed in Johnny that proves his natural aptitude for it. When she finishes, it seems absurd to think that Johnny, with his infinitely superior qualifications, cannot do what others have done. And Johnny, though professing at first a reluctance to accept this view of the matter, cannot in the long run disagree with it. It has all along been his luck that he doubted, not his ability. Now that bad luck is shown to be a trivial circumstance before a little determination and persistence, the pinnacle to which Johnny's natural talents will lift him is plainly to be seen. With the inborn vanity natural to every man confirmed by the sincere faith of a girl like Innocent, Johnny brims over with new-found self-assurance. And to the woman that's saying, "This is absurd, this is over the top," it's actually not. Men thrive under a woman's bolstering of his ego and his ability. She is what spurs him to greatness. History proves that out. Johnny returns for sympathy. It is not long, however, before his employer jolts it out of him, and Johnny in the dumps returns to Innocent for sympathy. The poor girl has to begin all over again her task of building up Johnny's self-assurance. She gradually shifts from sympathy to encouragement and optimism, and finally makes Johnny ashamed of himself for letting a mere employer, a real inferior in the things that count, shatter his self-confidence. True, his employer temporarily has the advantage of Johnny, but look at his age and look at the start he had. A year or two and the positions will be reversed, and then Johnny will show who is the superior. Thus is Johnny resuscitated. Now, although this resuscitation must be repeated every time Johnny meets with the reverse, it grows easier with each repetition. Self-confidence is a thing that grows upon a man, especially when it is frequently confirmed by another beside himself. Johnny, therefore, shows signs of a gradual change of character. He appears less often a diffident, discouraged, and unambitious man, and more often a confident, positive, and compelling one. He acquires a sense of strength and power that makes both himself and others sit up and take notice. Under its influence, it seems reasonably certain that even if his position does not immediately improve, before long it will. His judgment, therefore, may be said to be almost satisfied, but not quite, for he still cherishes a few mental reservations. This self-assurance is too new for him to place implicit confidence in it. What if, after undertaking to maintain a household, he should find himself mistaken about his ability to provide for it? With this and similar questions still confronting Johnny, it appears as if nothing short of a substantial increase in his earnings will ever bring him to the action stage. And this reminds me a little of a woman when I was growing up at church. Her husband had a sales job where he was frequently laid off during down times, and she always prepared for the down times by squirreling away money and physical goods, canned goods, tissues, toilet paper, everything that would be needed for the 3 months while he was looking for a new job. And then she would bolster him during those 3 months, telling him, "You always get a job. It'll be no time at all, and it'll be a better job." And she would do all the behind-the-scenes work and bolster him, and he always got a better job. And the other thing that amazed me about her is she never said, "Well, I guess I'd better go to work to fill in." Now that would have made him sit on the couch and say, "What's the use?" Or, "Well, you earned the income for a while," as did friends in similar circumstances. It was interesting to watch the difference between the women who said, "Well, I guess I need to go to work," and they had to keep working for the rest of their lives. Whereas this woman was like, "You can do it." And she was thinking, "There's no way I'm going to work. I need to be at home with our children." And her attitude is what made the difference. Prompting action. Unaware that under the circumstances she is doing the thing best calculated to win Johnny over, Innocent grows restive. In a fit of petulance, she encourages the attention of several other young men, and for a week or two dodges all meetings with the exasperating Johnny. When this behavior succeeds in arousing Johnny's resentment, Innocent suddenly becomes remorseful, contrives to meet Johnny accidentally, and is so sweetly repentant that Johnny arranges to call on her again, if only to give her a piece of his mind. Meantime, his indignation feeds upon itself until, when he does call, he is almost bursting with the many bitter reproaches he has prepared to heap upon her. Now, of course, we know that this always happens in the movies and in old books. And guess what? It happens in real life, too. I've read many biographies about women having to leave his sphere in order to get him to chase her, to desire her enough to go after her. It's true, even though it just seems so cliche. A moon, a garden, and a lawn swing. Aware of what is coming, and aware also of her guilt in the matter, Innocent fears that any excuse she might offer will prove wholly inadequate. The only thing to do, she feels, is to render the deliverance of Johnny's reproaches difficult, and thus to escape the necessity of offering any excuses. She therefore does not receive Johnny in the living room and under the glare of the electric lights. In such an environment, there would be nothing to discourage his rebukes. Instead, she guides Johnny to the garden. Here, with a meek little girl sitting next to him in a lawn swing, with the big moon beaming a gentle benediction upon the world of lovers, with the scented night air rustling the leaves overhead and wafting wisps of soft hair against him, the environment is, to say the least, inappropriate for an indignation meeting. Most men, confronted with such a romantic situation, if they did not abandon their proposed denunciation altogether, would at any rate postpone it for a more propitious occasion. But though Johnny feels the inappropriateness of the remarks he is about to deliver, his wrath is too great to be wholly subdued. He therefore begins. He discovers, however, that the successful delivery of a lecture by moonlight is difficult. In this romantic setting, where the dim light, the gentle breeze, the subdued sounds of distant activity, the vague outline of his companion, and the unwonted quiet of the girl herself, all suggest softness and tenderness. Johnny's words and voice sound to him frightfully harsh and brutal. The unresisting meekness of Innocent tempts him to go on until he feels that he has said far more than he intended saying, far more than the facts justified, and far more than this fragile creature can bear. He stops in dismay, self-convicted of the most appalling injustice, of the most colossal cruelty. He glances furtively at the averted head of her Innocence. Her bosom is heaving. Was that a sob he heard? Johnny proposes. Johnny simply melts. To think that he has brought this broken-hearted little creature to tears? What a brute he was to forget what a frail, tender little bird she is, after all. If he could only unsay the words he has just uttered. Dismayed with what he has done, he impulsively clasps the little hand lying so meekly in her lap and begs for forgiveness. A brute, he calls himself, but she remains disconsolate. He puts a hand under her trembling chin, lifts up her head, and endeavors to peer under the quivering eyelashes. Then, under the spell of the moonlight glowing in her hair, the tears creeping from beneath the downcast eyelids, the little chin resting helplessly in his hand, the manifest defenselessness of this frail creature in a cruel, brutal world, Johnny suddenly realizes what a glorious privilege it would be to take care of her always, to protect and to shelter her forever. In a flash, the objections of his judgment, the meagerness of his salary, the uncertainty of his future rise before him. Intoxicated, however, with the sublime consciousness of his manhood, Johnny can no longer doubt himself or his ability to sweep every obstacle before him. The optimism which Innocent has carefully nourished springs to full life in an instant. He can, he must, he will make enough money to take care of her properly. He blurts out the story that has so long been pent up, the story of what Innocent is and means to him. He doesn't believe there ever was such a love since the world began. Now, many women run to the bedroom or run outside. They never let their man see them cry, or they cry fake tears, or they start yelling. Actually, the way to win a man's heart is to let him see you cry, that his words hurt. Instead of reacting, but sometimes you don't need to say anything at all. But one easy thing to say is, ouch. That's it. Ouch, and let the tears fall. That will win him over than anything else you can say. Nature triumphs. In this sudden and unexpected proposal, Johnny satisfies his judgment and is persuaded to act in practically the same moment. Thus, the last stage of winning him is completed. Here again, then, we find that the man, in being won, passes through the 5 stages of attention, interest, desire, judgment, and action. The master salesman winning his customer, the silver-tongued orator winning his audience, have shown no more skill in winning men than little Innocent, without training, without experience, and without any guidance but her impulses, has shown in putting Johnny through the 5 stages of the process. Though she perhaps had never heard of the 5 stages, and though she had at no stage of the transaction the haziest notion of what the next stage would be, instinct took the place of plan, and impulse of method. It was a triumph of nature, not of Innocent. The latter, indeed, was a mere pawn of the former. Unfortunately, nature does not always thus take charge of matters. With any other man but Johnny, perhaps Innocent's instincts and impulses could not have been relied upon. With a man of different character, different methods would have been necessary, and mere instinct would not have supplied them. Even with Johnny, if the circumstances had been different, a modification of methods might have been required that instinct alone would never have furnished. Under such conditions, Innocent would have found that though she was rather clever at attracting attention, she could not arouse interest. Or, succeeding in this, she would have been unable to intensify the interest into desire. Or, having gotten so far, she may never have been able to overcome the objections of his judgment. She may not even have recognized them, for the objections in another man might have been quite different. Therefore, since a man must be inveigled through each of the 5 stages before he is completely won, all the instincts and impulses of nature with another man or with the same man in different circumstances would have been of little value. If instead of depending wholly upon the guidance of nature, Innocent had studied the art of winning men, she could have been much more certain of a successful outcome, whether with Johnny or with any other man. She would know not only of 1 or 2, but of a score of ways to attract attention, which is what the other books are going to go into. She would not depend wholly upon luck to change the attention into interest, but would employ half a dozen methods of arousing interest that have been tried and proven in numberless other courtships. She would not give up if the man showed no desire to marry, but would recall the many cases where such a desire had been created in seemingly indifferent men, would pick out from these methods most likely of success with this particular man, and would apply those methods in exactly the same fashion as they have been successfully applied on countless other men. She would not acquiesce if the man's judgment prohibited his yielding to his desire, but would resort to one of the many ways that have been found for overcoming the scruples of a man's judgment. And finally, she would not permit the man to choose his own good time for action, and perhaps to delay it until his ardor had cooled, but she would designedly set the stage for a proposal, and would so contrive matters that there and then, whether he would or no, he must speak out. That is the end of chapter 1. If you kind of think, that's it, I didn't learn very much, that's because they haven't started teaching the techniques yet. That was kind of like an overview story about the 5 stages of winning a man. And the rest of the books go into the how-to. Chapter 2 is called Why Men Are Hard to Win, and we'll start that with another video.